Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're your shortcut to getting genuinely well-informed, always aiming for those surprising facts, and just enough humor to keep you listening. Today, we're diving into something maybe you think is just for, epic fantasy or big sci-fi movies, world building. But here's what's really fascinating. It's not just dragons and spaceships. Seriously, think about the worlds you move through every day. Your job, your favorite coffee spot. Every single story. Doesn't matter if it's a medieval market or just a quiet chat in a cafe today, it relies on building its world.
That's absolutely spot on. Yeah, world building is fundamental. It's often kind of overlooked, I think, in any good story. So our mission in this deep dive is really to explore how you create a story world effectively, make sure it actually, lifts the narrative up instead of just weighing it down with detail. We'll unpack the core ideas, some practical techniques that make worlds feel real and vibrant for you, the audience. And this is all drawn from the sources we looked at.
Okay, let's unpack this then, because I think a lot of us think we know world building. We picture like detailed maps or complex magic systems maybe. Mm-hmm. But how do we define it so it covers everything, not just the fantasy stuff? What's the basic definition that works everywhere?
Well, at its core, world building is really everything a storyteller does to set up the specific where and when of their story. Simple as that almost. But crucially, it's also about clearly showing what makes this particular version of reality different from your own, the audience's reality. It's about setting the stage, sure, but maybe more importantly, revealing its unique personality, its rules. And this really comes down to answering two key questions for you, the audience. First, where and when are we? Okay, so this covers the setting, yeah. The time period, the location, the culture that exists there. Are we talking like 1930s Chicago? You instantly picture the vibe, the speakeasies, the music. Or are we on Mars 200 years from now? Totally different challenges, different society. Is it a huge buzzing city full of future tech? Or maybe a tiny, quiet fishing village stuck in its ways? These details orient you straight away. Then the second big question, how is this world different from ours, right? This is where the unique stuff comes in. What tech do they have? Are there rules like magic or different physics that aren't like ours? What are the social norms? Are there other species? Did some big historical event change everything? Now, these differences can be really obvious. A galaxy far, far away, laser swords, aliens, can't miss it. Or they can be super subtle. Think about a city today, but it's just, a little more corrupt maybe, or a little more magical, or just feels a little more dangerous than the real world you know. And the more unfamiliar these differences are, the more carefully they need to be set up so you can follow along and really get into the story.
Okay, so those two questions are the foundation. Makes sense. But, worlds can be vastly different in scale. Like you said, a single coffee shop versus a whole galaxy. Does the way you answer those questions change depending on the scale, or is the basic idea always the same?
That's a really good point to clarify. The principle itself, always the same. Doesn't matter the scale. You still need to ground the audience in that where and when, and you have to highlight what's uniquely different about it. But the way you deliver that information, that absolutely changes. A story in a modern coffee shop might establish its difference with just like one line about some new app everyone's using, done. But a big fantasy epic, it might need whole chapters just to explain its magic system, right? But fundamentally, they're both answering those same two core questions. The aim is always to make the world's specific choices feel intentional, feel important.
That's a really helpful distinction. It takes us right to something I find fascinating, this idea that world building has to serve the story. It shouldn't just be cool for its own sake. We see creators build these amazing, huge universes, sometimes just because they enjoy it, right? But you mentioned something called the why here, why now test. How does that help keep the world focused on the narrative, stop it from becoming, a burden?
That really is the acid test, yeah? The why here, why now question. It's like the ultimate filter for your story elements. Every single piece of your world, like every rule, every specific detail, every bit of tech, it should be there because it directly impacts the plot or how a character changes or grows. Here's the main idea. If you can take out a rule or some specific world detail or just change it and the main plot doesn't really change in a significant way, then it might just be clutter. It might not belong. Remember, the world exists for the story, not the other way around. Every piece should help carry that narrative forward. A really strong example from the sources is the movie Minority Report. That pre-crime technology, it's not just some cool futuristic background detail. It is the reason the story happens. It's the whole setup. The fact that murders can be predicted and stopped before they happen, that's not just a detail about the world. It's the main conflict. It drives what every character does. It shapes that whole society. It dictates the plot. Take away pre-crime, there's no story left. The world's unique rule creates the drama.
I really like that distinction. But, okay, what about the storyteller who just loves building worlds? They enjoy figuring out the tiny details, the histories, inventing languages even. How do you tell them to balance that really strong creative urge with this serve the story rule without kind of crushing their imagination?
Yeah, that's a very common tension. It's a real challenge. My advice is usually go ahead, indulge that passion, build the intricate histories, design the weird plants and animals, do it. But then when you actually sit down to write this particular story, you have to be a bit ruthless in choosing what makes it onto the page. You don't need to show all your homework, Pick the 2 or 3 elements of your world that are the most unique, the most impactful, the ones that genuinely shape this plot or reveal something crucial about these characters. The rest, it can be background texture. You can hint at it, maybe save it for a different story or a companion guide later. The audience only needs to know what's essential for this specific story, not the entire encyclopedia you built in your head. The goal is really to create that feeling of depth, without getting bogged down explaining everything.
That really changes how you think about details. So for me, as a listener or a reader, what's the difference? What do I feel when every detail seems essential, not just decorative?
Oh, the effect is huge. When every detail serves a purpose, you, the audience, you feel respected.
Right.
You don't feel like you're being taken down some pointless side road or given info that doesn't pay off later. It creates this feeling of efficiency and real immersion. The world isn't just there. It's an active player in the story. It influences choices. It raises the stakes. It tells you why characters act the way they do. It just makes the whole experience much more satisfying, more memorable, because the setting itself feels alive, feels relevant.
Okay, so we've nailed down that the more different a world is, the more we, the audience, need to know to kind of get it. But this is where things can go wrong, right? We've all read those books or seen those movies with the massive info dumps, like walls of text or clunky exposition scenes. How do we avoid that? How do we weave the rules into the story naturally?
That's the real craft, isn't it? It's all about showing, not telling, how the world works. And there are actually several pretty effective ways to do this. First off, there's something called narrative shorthand. Basically, storytellers can use ideas or genre rules that you already know to get you up to speed quickly. Take zombies, for instance, just that one word. It instantly brings up a whole set of expectations for you, right? How they act, the danger, how people might survive. It's super efficient. But now, contrast that with something totally new, let's say hollowers. Creatures that drain your memories, leave you alive but empty. Now that's a cool idea, right? Really intriguing. Maybe it's the story's hook, but it's unfamiliar. So that idea is going to need a lot more explaining within the story itself because you don't have any existing shorthand for it in your head.
Quick question on that, though. If you rely too much on shorthand, does it risk making the world feel a bit, generic? Or is it more about how you use it?
Oh, it's definitely about how you use it. Strategic deployment, like you said. Shorthand is a tool. It's not meant to be a crutch. It's great for quickly setting up a baseline, getting everyone on the same page. But if you just stop there, your world probably will feel generic. The trick is to use that shorthand to give the audience a familiar place to start and then immediately show them the unique twist. What makes your zombies different? What's the interesting angle on your magic system? It's about meeting expectations just enough so you can then play with them or build on them in cool ways. Okay, moving on. Another technique, using who knows what to your advantage.
Yeah.
You, the audience, can learn a ton just by seeing the world through the eyes of a character who's also new there. The pilot episode of Scandal is a brilliant example. The new character, Quinn, she's basically your guide. You learn how Olivia Pope's high-pressure world works right alongside her. So the explanations feel natural. They feel motivated by Quinn's need to learn. It's a really smart way to handle exposition. Okay, but what if all your characters already know the rules? They live there. They get it. Well, then the technique is to show how characters interact with those rules just in their normal, everyday lives. Like in that time zone screenplay example from the sources, the rules of their world, especially their unique tech, become clear really fast. Not because someone stops and explains it, but just because the characters use the stuff. It's part of their routine. They check certain devices. They use specific systems. It's just how things are done there. So we understand the world by watching how it works in practice. Kind of like learning the unwritten rules of a new office just by watching your colleagues.
Right. So it's about making those rules feel baked in, like part of the background reality. But how do you stop those rules, especially when you show them through consequences, from feeling like Deus ex machina, sudden reveals just to fix a plot problem?
That's a really critical point. And it leads right into the next technique. Show through consequences, but you have to be careful. Like if a character drops their sandwich and it just floats up instead of falling, boom. You instantly get that gravity is different here. no explanation needed. Or in Time Zone, when that character Griffin rides his bike over the water, that unexpected result immediately tells you, okay, some cops here have super speed. The key to avoiding that decelerus ex machina feel is foreshadowing. You need to hint at the existence of the rule or the ability before that big dramatic moment, even if you don't fully explain it yet. The audience shouldn't feel like the rule was just invented right then to save someone. They should feel like, oh, right, that's how that thing works. I just hadn't seen it used like that before. The consequence reveals a rule that was already there. And finally, maybe the most straightforward advice. Just dramatize it. Actively look for natural moments within scenes where the world's rules can be shown in action. Ask yourself, when would we normally see this rule or this piece of tech being used? Can a character's reaction to some weird social custom show us how strict it is? Can a conflict happen because of a specific limitation in their technology? Build those moments into the story so we learn by watching things happen. And underlying all of these techniques is the absolute bedrock principle, consistency. Rules mean nothing if they're broken whenever it's convenient for the plot. You have to introduce them early, reinforce them often, and stick to them. Otherwise, they just feel like cheap tricks or plot holes.
Yeah.
Or worse, like you're breaking the promise you made to the audience about how this world works.
That point about consistency feels so important. It's not just what the rules are, but the fact that they are reliable, that you can count on them. Okay, we've covered big concepts, subtle differences. Let's get really practical now. Even stories set firmly in our world, right now, they still need world building. And that often involves a lot of research, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Think about it, right? A contemporary drama set right in your city, a workplace comedy, a really detailed period romance. They all get so much better with specific, believable details that come straight from research. And it's not just facts. It's about how people in a certain job actually talk, the specific tools they use every day, the little social rules they follow, the emotional feel of a past era. These details make a story feel real, even if you, the audience, don't consciously notice all the research behind it. It just creates that sense of authenticity. But there's a big caution sign here. Research can very easily become just procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredibly easy to fall down that research rabbit hole. You spend weeks learning about, medieval farming when your story's really about the knights fighting. So to keep your research focused, really zoom in on two main priorities. First, what's absolutely essential to your core concept. So if you're writing a murder mystery set in, say, 1978, you have to research how police investigations actually worked then. What were the standard procedures? What forensic tech did they have? And crucially, what couldn't they do? Did they have DNA testing then? Probably not in the way we think of it. These details aren't just flavor. They actually dictate what's possible in your plot, what the constraints are. Okay, second priority. How do people actually interact in this specific world or setting? Understanding the relationships, the power structures, the social norms, that's vital. So for that same 1978 cop story, you'd want to ask things like, were there women on the police force then? How were they treated? Is loyalty to your partner and your unit the absolute most important thing? Or is it more complicated? Is the culture in the department really rigid and by the book? Or is it more like a fraternity with its own unwritten rules? These human details, these cultural nuances, they're what really make a world feel lived in and make the characters' choices make sense.
It definitely sounds like research is this double-edged sword. You need it, but it can also just swallow all your time.
Mm-hmm.
How do you figure out when you've done enough to move forward without just getting lost forever in that rabbit hole?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? For so many writers, I think the key is really to be targeted. Be strategic. Get enough information so you feel confident moving forward. Enough to build the basic framework of your story. Write those first few scenes without getting sidetracked by every interesting little tangent you find. You need enough to make the core story believable and functional. And remember, you can always go back and layer in more detail later, during revisions, when you know exactly what the story needs. The critical balance, really, is giving enough detail so that you, the audience, can understand the world and believe in it, but not so much that it overwhelms you or just grinds the actual story to a halt. You have to trust that, often, the 90% of your world building that stays off the page still supports the 10% that the audience actually sees.
And that really ties it all together, doesn't it? When those details feel purposeful, when the rules are consistent, when the research is woven in carefully, the world stops being just scenery.
Yeah.
It actually becomes part of the story's, spine.
Yeah.
Holding it all together, giving it shape and meaning.
Precisely, yeah. When world building is done really well, you, the audience, you don't just feel like you're watching events happen to people. You feel immersed. You feel like you've actually genuinely lived in that world, even if it was just for a couple of hours. And that feeling, that total immersion, that's what makes a story stick with you, makes it unforgettable, makes it a place you might even want to visit again.
That is a powerful thought to end on. So maybe as you go about your day today, think about the world you live in, or maybe even create.
Yeah.
In your job, your family, your hobbies.
Yeah.
What are their unspoken rules, their unique details? And how do that where and when and those rules shape the stories you are living and telling every single day? It's kind of everywhere once you start to look for it.